On this episode of the Roundtable, we're digging in to the topic that I think is hard for a lot of private practice providers, and that is cost. Concussion therapy is not cheap. And so how do you recommend services that cost money? And how do you feel about billing services when we know that this is a tight place and a hard place for our clients to be? You're also going to meet Michelle. Michelle's been on this journey for a couple of years, and she's got multiple things happening in this case. We're going to learn about vision, we're going to talk about the neck, we're going to talk about all these pieces, and I hope that from learning about Michelle, you take some gems and some tidbits away as well. A huge thank you to our sponsor, Neuronic, who shares a mission for expanding this conversation of concussion and brain health, who without you, these episodes would not be possible. Enjoy. Welcome back to another episode of the Roundtable, where we are joined by myself, Dr. Rachel, Dr. Cam, and Dr. Rob. And today's hot topic, this is a conversation we've been having in the last little bit here. And we had so much good stuff off camera over the days that, I'm really excited to bring it to the forefront. And this is the conversation around cost and billing for our services. And Rob, I'm actually gonna let you start off with the question that started this whole conversation for us.
So the question that I had is coming from a hospital environment, which is publicly funded, to you guys who work in the private sector. It's how does cost come into this? How do you approach it when the service or the product or the therapy that you're providing, one, costs the patient money, but also makes you money? That can be seen as a conflict of interest, and how do you minimize the effect of that to ensure that you can provide the patient the best care that they truly need?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's about value. Do people get out of what they spend, because money's energy essentially, but do they get out of that something that they're happy with in that sense? And it is a tricky thing existing outside of, especially in Canada, where we live in a model where we have a lot of access to levels of healthcare, but not all of healthcare. And for me, I'm probably the one sitting here who has the least amount of insurance coverage within anything else. So personally, how I've chosen to address that is from the sense of, my promise with all the people we see is essentially that they will be happy with the value that they get out of the services, or they can return like for example with glasses. If we say, hey, these glasses are going to help your dizziness and vertigo stuff, and it doesn't, if it, we will either change it at no cost, take it back for a refund, or even on our services, if we say that something's going to really help, and we set goals and metrics with the patient, and then if it doesn't help them enough that they're happy, we will actually issue them a refund on the service. Now, I'm not perfect. I have to do that a couple times a year, and that's also part of our R&D in-house. And has that honesty policy been taken advantage of over the years? Absolutely, a couple of times. But it's also given a lot of people the confidence to be able to proceed with care who might not have otherwise, because as you mentioned before, what happens a lot is these are people in vulnerable positions. There's no shortage of people out there running clinics and businesses and other things who care more about their bottom line than they do about providing real results to their patients. And a lot of people get taken advantage of. And so it's totally fair, because you get a lot of people in the public health system who become a little disenfranchised with some of the private clinics that are out there. And a lot of the public becomes disenfranchised. And quite frankly, myself, I'm a giant skeptic of many things, most things, including my own field. And I'm also terribly disenfranchised with so much other care that I've received. So that's how we approach it in our world, and that's just kind of what makes sense to me. What about you guys?
I find this is one of the hardest, as a clinic owner, setting my fee schedule, for lack of a better term, is one of the hardest decisions I make every year. And it's this kind of balancing act between, I know my team is exceptional at what they do, but as the clinic I've chosen to run also involves significant amount of technology that you can't receive anywhere else in our province. And I've chosen to invest in that technology because ultimately it gets people better faster, because that technology allows us to see things we couldn't see with the naked eye, or to create change in those pieces. So the tricky part and the catch-22 for me always is, well, if I'm bringing in this piece of tech that costs me $50,000, I have to pay for it. And the only way my clinic generates the money to pay for that piece of tech is offset in my fee schedule. And so I always say, like, if anyone is going into, I know there's people who make bank going into healthcare, but like that's not why I think most of us go into healthcare. And constantly, like, and I'll say to Rachel, like I'm very transparent with my team when we're setting fee schedules too, and we'll have the conversation in the clinic of, I need to do a rate increase, very aware that we take insurance clients, right? And part of the reason we will take insurance clients is because, and for us, we do the ICBC and private insurance, is because for some of those people, that is their only access to funds to be able to receive care. And you know, there's the catch-22 of, at the same time, an insurance company shouldn't be able to dictate our value, right? And so there's a lot of clinics that will also base fees on, and we used to do it, well, ICBC covers this, so this is what I'm going to charge. But now I've let a massive insurance company dictate the value that we give our clients, and then I'm limited by what I can bring into the clinic. So I don't think there's not an easy answer. This is literally one of the hardest questions I have to reevaluate every single year. And I think what we've tried to do, and the conversation we actually have with clients is, we do the assessment and we say, okay, based on what we see, this would be our best recommendation on how we think we can help you move forward the fastest. Constant flux, like team discussion. And then if the question gets asked about, like, what is this fee? And they're like, I can't do that. Okay, let's work backwards. Let's see what is within your budget that we can support and still generate change, because I struggle with the clinics. You need to have a certain amount of dosage for change, right? And so you're doing clients just as much of a disservice, in my opinion, if you're seeing them and on repeat, but you're just doing the same shit.
It's like something that, what is that old saying? Yeah, if you think hiring a professional is expensive, it's like try hiring one twice or try hiring an amateur. And you know, when you look at cost and value, you know, if you buy a $300 smartphone that doesn't work properly versus a $1,000 smartphone that does everything you want to do, which one's actually giving you more value? And so some people really tie things because they think of it only as what's the price. And the fee part for clinics, I've struggled with that over the years too, because I've hit burnout at points where I'm like, I'm not even caring for my staff, my patients, or my family the way that I could be, because I'm running at such a level to try to make things work that my energy's totally gassed. And so one of the ways we explain that to our patients is the fees are set at such a level that I know that we can provide them the level of care that's needed for them to actually get better. And I would way rather do that than, you know, have things where it's artificially low. And I remember working in a clinic in Florida where it's like, I had like 8 minutes with a patient. So I'm going in there, I'm just like kind of guessing at what to do within those 8 minutes. And I was, all right, see you later. Like, you don't really even get to think about it or care about it the same way.
When you see those clinics that are this super low rates, those are most of the time, those are also the clinics that are expected to grill out 4 to 6 people an hour because they have to see that volume. And it's honestly, it's super shitty that it's a business. And it's one of those things that if I were a multimillionaire and if anyone wants to contribute billions of dollars to my clinic, I will accept it, so that we can provide services for free. Because it is one of those things, I love what I do so much, and I think everyone here does, that if I could, I would. But it is definitely one of the, it is a hard
Now the one good part about it though, and the conversation which I do have with patients as well, because with a lot of my GP friends, the one nice thing I say is, because I'm not shackled by the other healthcare, I can set the fees in the office up in a way that actually gives you the experience that you need. Yeah. Because so many physicians will be like, my job's hard, I have 6 minutes with the patient and one complaint to try to fix it. And that's not a great model to work under. Yeah. The other one kind of funny thing to flip on its head from a private perspective, your clinic only still exists because it gets results. If it didn't get results, it would cease to exist because people wouldn't go there anymore. Whereas if you were fully publicly covered, you could get 0 results and you would still exist unless somebody internally decided that you shouldn't. And I think, so the market kind of does dictate that too.
1,000%.
But it is a question of how do you find the right provider to make sure you're going to get the value for what you invest in your recovery, because it's all value.
And I think when I mentor the other clinicians too, there's always this question of, how do I build my concussion practice? And it goes back to like community connections and word of mouth is some of the best marketing in the world, you wouldn't refer to a clinic if you never heard anything good about them, right? And so it's that piece of, like, there's a reason we're booked 3-6 months out. There's a reason people fly in from all over the world. We're constantly, and that's just it, we're constantly getting change. And then it's always that catch-22 of, like, people are always like, well, I wish I'd come sooner, because they've spent thousands of dollars.
Or how about opportunity cost? What's the cost of not being in work for 6 months? You know, if it takes you $5,000 to get better, but 6 months out of work costs you, you know, $50,000, like, you know, the opportunity cost one is huge, and sometimes a lot of people don't think about stuff that way.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to how humans look at money. Totally different topic, but in general, but particularly, like you said, they come in and they see that number, and there's not the discussion around the opportunity cost that if you get better, that piece of things. But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, do you have patients that come into Emerge that are like, well, this costs money, so I can't?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of the time with things like medications, if I give them prescription, they're like, well, this is what I'm recommending, and it's up to you whether or not you value that enough to spend the means, the resources that you have on it. But people ask, like, when I refer to you guys or any other public clinic, I get asked all the time, how much is this going to cost me? Or do they take insurance? Is this covered? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, I mean, and then there's always the question in the scenario that runs out too, on the same front, is if someone has been an insurance-based client and now insurance cuts them off, then what? Right? And it's kind of the same discussion. I will say none of our clients ever expect us to continue to do anything for free. Like, they have quite respect of our time and our value and the change they have. And but the system, by all means, is.
I think it also disempowers people, though, because it's like, we'll have people where it's like, you know what, we'll be complaining about the cost of this, and it's like, I can see that you spend at least $200 a month on your nails and lashes, or probably $600, or whatever it is, or, you know, on the rims for your car, or whatever. And so I think, and that's a whole separate conversation, but I think in our healthcare as Canadians, we've been trained to kind of like be unhappy if we have to pay for something out of pocket.
Well, and I mentor physical therapists. That's a piece of what I do, and mentoring them in how to, in this space and in their businesses. And that is actually two of the biggest holdups. It's like, they don't charge their worth, and they're terrified to change their practice model, but that's a whole other discussion. And again, it's like, I think a lot of what happens in healthcare too is you're expected to be a martyr. Right? Like, you're expected. I remember, so I did my very first online coaching business in 2019. It was called Concussion Coach. It was my foray into the online business world. And obviously, at that point in time, my program that I was creating was for individuals with concussion, persistent concussion. And this is before I'm like a people pleaser. This is 2019, so this is like baby Natasha in the online space, chronic people pleaser, hadn't done my own trauma work, got dysregulated if someone was unhappy with me, and would like try to do this. So this was the Natasha that decided to try to start an online business. And I remember the first time I got a comment on I did like a post, and then it was like, and if you want to join Concussion Coach, that scenario. And the comment was, "This is disgusting. How dare you take advantage of someone with a brain injury and try to charge them money?" And I remember reading that. I was, again, chronic people-pleasing Natasha with her own trauma work, like in tears, being like, oh my God, like, am I doing something bad? Am I doing something wrong? And it goes back to that, like, it is a vulnerable population. And like, that comment, I remember at that time, definitely made me be like, can I not charge?
I've faced that too.
Right?
I've had that from physicians within our public system, teachers, parents, people, like whatever it is, because it is a tricky thing, and you kind of go, well, my hands are tied. Like, I don't have any public coverage. I I don't just get a salary and then get to help people and get paid. Like, I have to figure out a way to help these people and to do this, but I also need to figure out a way to look after my family and my stuff and make sure that I'm there to do that. So it's a tricky thing. So for any billionaires watching, please set us up with something where we can actually just get paid and then go do our work.
I will say what we have done at Symphony over the years, in my attempt, and then I'll actually share one of like the dreams I have, in my attempt to give back to the community a bit, is I have a pro bono account a year. So there's a certain number of services that I will pro bono for people to receive free services. It's always me that does it because I don't want to ask my team to give their time for free. If they choose to, that's fine, but that is something that I personally take on each year. And I usually did that in the form of 1 or 2 to 3 intensives a year. And then there was an application process that people would submit an application on why they needed the support of the funded session. So like that's my attempt, is like I have this pro bono amount that I like donate back into our community every year. And then also in my just like any community like talk and stuff I do, like I don't charge for those things either locally. So it's trying to give back to our community as much as I can. And then that's also, I will say, that's also why I've started some of my online components. Like I have a program called Concussion Mini School that is completely free. And it is a resource library full on a ton of topics within concussion. And I do live group coaching twice a month. And it's for anybody on a persistent healing journey from around the world. So I've tried to find, well, I can't have my clinic services for free. I've tried to find other ways to support the concussion brain health community in a way that is either zero barrier financial entry or low financial entry.
Natasha, your education will too, because quite frankly, the more that this education is out there, and I think of that from the optometry world, the more that it's out there, the more therapists that are doing it, the barriers to entry then become lower. Because you know the time, energy, and money costs that you've put into developing what you do is substantial. And I can say that from us too. It's like probably massive amounts of time, energy, and money have gone into figuring out how to do things this way and to get it there, which is crazy when you look at that impact on family, physical, like my own physical health, other things there. But then when that model can then be taught to other people, then all of a sudden that care accessibility becomes so much easier, because if everybody can do it that way, then the fees required for it come down. The experts will still be the experts, but more people can get the care they need at fee structures of people who haven't had to invest, 12 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars figuring out what they do.
Yeah, and I will say that's part of the mission behind Nerds, is that piece of, well, am I honored and humbled when people fly across the world to come to Little Nanaimo, BC for concussion rehab? Absolutely. Do I love working with them? Absolutely. They shouldn't have to. Right? Like what we do exactly should be readily available for people, so they don't have to have that expense of coming, unless they just want to hang out with our dynamic personalities. But they shouldn't have to. Like they should be able to find it. And that's a huge piece of what we're trying to do with Concussion Nerds, is train clinicians in this model that we practice, because we get change faster, and we know that. We've seen it over the years enough times to be like, this works. So that way it does increase accessibility and ideally increase overall financial burden and stuff on that. But yeah, it's a hard, I always feel like a rock and a hard place. Always.
I'm very grateful that I don't practice medicine in the States.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, optometry in the States isn't fun either. Like if you're tied into insurance plans, it's awful. And
I'll do consults for people in the US, and I'll always just be like, I don't understand, I don't understand your insurance system, and how they're so restricted on who they can see it boggles my brain.
Then it's like so many physio or chiro clinics, they don't even take insurance in the States because it's just too big of a hassle, right? And so at least there's a little bit more accessibility to that here. But I think just being like open and honest with your patient of like, it is my job to tell you what I think the best treatment option is going to be for you, and that's my number one priority, to let you know that. But then the secondary thing is we have to have a conversation to make sure that like that is something that you're okay with, and if not, like let's come up with plan B, because there are other ways to go about it, and even if it might not be quite as efficient to get to that angle, like I'd rather be working with you to achieve this goal together than do 1 or 2 sessions, and then you're like, I can't afford this, I can't do this, and then we drop off, right? So it's like being able to be flexible and honest with your patients, and yeah, because not everyone's the same, right? And I hate it when you hear patients that come in and they tell you this story like, oh, I went to this clinic and they told me 40 sessions, doing this, you'll be perfect at the end of it. And it's like, how can you predict that?
Yep.
That's not possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Want to do a case?
Love to.
Okay. Michelle's an American. I've never met Michelle in person. Michelle and I connected via my free online mini school program. She actually had a physical therapist who was part of a program that I taught and then kind of guided her our way. So there's a bit of a history here. I'm not going to go into detail about all of it because there's a lot. There's a lot of information if you want to read
Did she
it.
write this or did you?
She wrote this.
I like her.
Right?
I'm reading this and I'm like some of the things she writes in there, I'm like, I feel like this is somebody I get along with. Like, she's funny.
She was great. She knows she has a bit of a history, and so I told her that I would happily share her story on the show. And she was like, I'm gonna send you a document. And I was like, okay. And so yeah, I've like added a few things that we had in a conversation, but that's her typing it out and just that organization and that piece of things. So yeah. So Michelle is from Texas. She has an incredibly supportive husband as well. Before she got her concussion, she felt like life was finally falling into place. She was able to travel, and she was someone who really never traveled alone before, but had the confidence to travel alone and did a yearly trip to Austria with her dad. She shared that growing up, she'd actually never really bonded with her father. And as an adult, doing this trip every year, she was really getting to reestablish this relationship with him, and it felt really special. And so she was really loving this and the way life was progressing. And then this concussion happened, and she just described it as felt like her life just got ripped away from her. And I think I always share this piece when we share our stories because I think this is a genuine consensus of a concussion, although technically a mild traumatic brain injury can significantly impact and disrupt people's lives. I love that I said top 3 goals. She's really got 4 goals that she wants to return to. Driving, returning to work. She absolutely loves her job. I'll talk more about it in a second. Cooking, and then travel. Cool thing about her though, what I will say is that I've connected with her a couple times over the last several months, and she now has found a team that she actually feels like she's starting to make progress again for the first time in a while, which is amazing. Makes me super happy. So here's her concussion history. She had an injury in 1999, was kind of the first one on record. Passed out while she was eating in a restaurant. She never knew why she fainted. She fell out of a booth and hit her head on the brick floor and actually went into a seizure. She doesn't recall any lasting issues on that one though, right? So that's one that you might expect there might be something, but she recovered well. 2011 is the next one on record. A head and neck injury and concussion. So a tree branch, oh my goodness gracious, a tree branch fell on her head. And she said she felt a crunch around the C5, C7 area, 2 to 3 weeks of symptoms, mainly motion sickness and headache. But then it also sounds like no actual rehab after those 2, okay? The latest one was in 2021. So in February, she slipped on black ice and fell backwards. Her head bounced off the concrete, and the neck and abdominal muscles were very sore for a few days. She was tired for a week or so, and then 3 months after that, she started getting severe episodes of vertigo. She had been diagnosed also in 2017 and 18 with Meniere's disease in her right ear. She'd seen 2 ENTs, 2 PCPs, said that all of this was actually linked to Meniere's, and there was nothing that could be done. So, there was another concussion, so there's some other like major vertigo episodes. She got started on, oh gosh, what's that one?
Meclizine?
Okay, so she got started on meclizine and Zofran. In that point in time, she always had like face flushing and heat and all these pieces. This is all a part of her vertigo. There was another concussion in December 2023. This one, she was pushing, okay, there's a few more, pushing the recycling can to the street, and she ended up getting a laceration to the top of her head. It tipped backwards, she fell, laceration to the top of the head that required 10 staples, neck stiffness, CT of head and scan on that, head and neck on that one, that was negative. The concussion, motion sickness with rolling in bed, nausea and headaches. It's like, I wonder if BPPV was ever cleared on any of these. With the vertigo and the like constant smacking of the head. She had a good goosebump on that one. And then 2 weeks after that, her stress levels went through the roof. She was very fatigued, started experiencing brain fog. Over the next 3 months, started having vertigo episodes. She says, my nervous system was on fire and I was on high level stress and anxiety. Nothing was able to calm me, and there was also a lot of family drama. So when we look at someone who is quite potentially going to develop persistent symptoms from a concussion, I mean, she's got the gambit of so many things happening that are just going to affect the nervous system's ability to be in a place of healing, that there'd be flags all over that on an initial assessment. For us, there would be flags all over that on an initial assessment, for sure. There was another injury, April 1st, 2024. She hit her head again on a tractor bucket. Oh, she farms. There we go. I was like, why? She farms. On a tractor bucket, small laceration, immediate nausea and head fullness, continued anxiety and stress. Again, the nervous system. So, and then there's some more history on vertigo happening. She got a corneal scratch in the right eye from dry eyes and contacts. More vertigo. There was lots happening. Vertigo via ambulance. Head CT was ordered just this past June, or maybe that's June 4th. And then November 11th was on a highway, violent vertigo, somehow ended up in the right lane to the left center of the median at 70 miles per hour. Forced through her head into the car frame, but nothing hit the car and she didn't spin. This was the last major episode, and since then, so since this November 11th injury, she's had almost daily vertigo issues. Luckily, they've decreased in intensity over the months, and she now calls them vertigo zaps, and also gets electrical zaps. So this is someone who's got quite an extensive head injury history, right? And it doesn't sound, I didn't ask her, to be honest, but it doesn't sound like there was a ton of rehab done. We're gonna go into like the team, at least after some of those earlier ones, unless it's in here later and I haven't read it yet. But no, rehab didn't start till 2024. No, 2022, okay, a little bit. Treatment, she's seen 7 ENTs who have all said Meniere's disease, and one has also said potentially vestibular migraine. She's seen 3, oh my gosh, neuro-otologists. Who wants to describe what neuro-otology is? Anyone? Do you know what neuro-otology is?
Presumably.
I'd say it's like the deeper level of ENT. So it's like if you could have like ENT as a specialty and then a more specific subspecialty of ENT.
I think it's probably like the neuro-ophthalmologist version that just specializes in
that element of things. Yeah. I know there's one in Vancouver people get referred to a lot here. 2 of those individuals said Meniere's. One said that he could cure her with brain surgery to cut the vestibular nerve. Glad she didn't do that.
Sorry, what was that conversation we have about recommending our own services?
That was that one. She lives in the US. Last one said it wasn't Meniere's because the hearing loss is not continuous. He suggested vestibular migraine and triple PD, but I had no idea who could help. Basically, no one would agree that head trauma could be a factor, was kind of the summary of that. So she's had multiple imaging done. Treatment-wise, over the years, she's done vestibular PT, she's done upper cervical chiropractic, she's seen functional medicine. She's currently on Prozac and, oh my gosh.
hydroxyzine.
There we go. I clearly just have this block to being able to say any medication, even if it is
I'm glad I could be useful.
so clearly spelled. She's currently using Prozac and hydroxyzine to help reduce anxiety. And the physician who prescribed it is also helping that it reduces some of her vertigo. She's got a psychologist, and she's just started with a new spine PT and a new functional neurologist, chiropractor, acupuncturist who does all those things. So her current challenges, there's a list. So context, complex history, lots of things going on, lots of stress in her life. She works in a research lab where, did I not put this in here? I don't think I did. Oh yeah, so she runs a medical research lab that specializes in neurotransmitters. So she's a smart woman. But there's a lot of pressure to be able to get back to work, or she's gonna lose funding in the academic world and potentially her job. So this has been, this sentence was the best thing I read. It's been extremely challenging to do frog I can't speak, you guys. Dissecting frogs, I feel like is what that means. But she loves her job, but she needs to get some data to the universities pretty dang soon, or they're gonna lose funding for this lab. So there's a lot of pressure there from a stress point. Her current challenges. So again, huge kudos to this individual because she is starting to finally notice some change with this current team that she has not had in the past, which is great. Brain fog, feels super heavy. She's got a lot of head pressure. She describes it as feeling like brain inflammation, headaches. When she talks to people, either in person or on the phone, she feels her neck and shoulder muscles start to tense up, and therefore her eyes start to go blurry and the head starts to follow. So she's like, I can't have a social life when this happens. Cognitive issues happen when everything else flares. She notices cognitive challenges. Eye pressure feels like inflammation. I feel limited in how far I can look in all directions. Right eye pressure and inconsistent blurry vision. She's like, I can't find any pattern on the blurriness, just noticing that it's in the right eye. Additional vision problems, convergence issues, fast-moving objects, background visuals, intermittent nystagmus when moving head. That's when I'm like, I would have rather have dug into that one a little bit more. And then limited peripheral vision. Eye-head coordination is reduced. She finds it difficult to write or do small tasks with her hands in the lab, cutting food, so it sounds like more that fine motor stuff. And she can't do any of it standing up, doesn't say why. Nerve pain in the inner corner of the right brow. There's a lot of like right orbital stuff going on here. Car sick when she drives or her husband drives, has to constantly hold her chin for stability and close her eyes. Right tinnitus, intermittent right fullness, loss of hearing in the right ear, and remembering she does have a Meniere's diagnosis. It hasn't gotten worse. She'll get like that crackly broken speaker feeling with sound in that right ear, she says. It's very painful. Face flushing during physical therapy and during periods of mental and physical stress. Vertigo episodes, some violent and uncontrollable with vomiting and profuse sweating. Stops with meds, and there's a list here. Ativan, Zofran, chlorpromazine.
Nailed that one.
Yes.
They should have to make all medications phonetic only.
Oh my gosh, right? This is how I chart with phonetic medications, and I'm like, any physician would cringe if he saw my charts when I tried to write my meds down, honestly. Balance issues, feels like someone is pulling my brain or squeezing my brain to stop. Dizzy when she bends down, bending with head down. Says she has a dysregulated nervous system, panic attacks with anxiety, can't relax and gets overwhelmed easily, very easily triggered, can't do normal head movements, neck is really stiff with range of motion, muscle soreness left and right. Sometimes she has to think about breathing or she thinks she forgets to breathe. So, I will say, and she knows this because we've had this conversation before, this is a case that sits in front of, now they're gonna sit in front of us before you usually, but this is a case.
They should usually.
Yeah. This is a case that's gonna sit in front of us and that providers listen to and they go, fuck. Because there's a lot going on. And this is, I'm not gonna lie, this isn't an abnormal client that sits in front of us either. And so Rach, I'm gonna kick this one to you to start. Like when you have someone like Michelle who comes and sits in front of you with this list of symptoms, where do you start? Like, what is jumping out at you in this that you're like, okay, here's where I want to dig into? Because
that's a loaded question,
isn't it?
There's a lot of pieces.
All on
to
Dr.
this.
Rachel Parker, my friends. Here we go.
No, there is a lot of pieces, and it's hard because there's been so many repetitive kind of injuries that have led up to this point, right? And I think we kind of talked about this in an earlier episode, but what's kind of accumulated to create that breaking point, right? And I think really taking the time in these patients especially to really listen to this whole story, and it's great that she wrote down so much because I think what can happen a lot is that pieces get missed, right? And so if you're not really taking the time to listen to the patient and get all of these kind of aspects to it, it's like, what are those root causes and what are those drivers, right? Is the dizziness or some of these symptoms flaring up because of the stress and the anxiety and the pressures that are kind of put on you externally or internally, and it's really just breaking all of that down.
Before you go deeper,
yes.
I'm going to interject really quick.
Please.
So I'm like, you're going to start going, and I'm not going to be able to stop. And this is a couple things too, right? Where in Emerge, you do not have time to sit there and listen to this history.
No.
Like this would be a scenario you'd have to be like, I'm cutting you off. Which, from a patient perspective, he's a dick. He wouldn't let me say anything. You don't have the time.
And that's not the job.
And that's not your job in that context. But I know you get this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I try and listen at the very least.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do have to direct, but like you see patients like this all the time, and they've come into the emergency department because something has happened that has put them past their breaking point. And a question I ask is like, okay, this has been going on for years. What happened tonight that made you come to the emergency department at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night? And then explaining to them that like, I can't fix this. Like, you've seen all of these people. I'm not going to be the one to solve this. If you have symptoms that are incapacitating right now, I can treat your symptoms. We're good at that, but I'm not going to solve the problem. I'm not going to fix it. There is no emergency here. But people often come into the emergency department saying, okay, this is where they're going to figure this problem out. And I have to tell them, like, it's not going to happen. And then they ask about seeing all these other providers and what do I think of them and who should I see, and that's another.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is someone who, not with you obviously, who did have a unfortunate, very negative experience in the emergency department. But this is also why I love you're here, because you're one of the kindest humans I know, and you do fabulous work. But I think sometimes, again, this is where there is a disconnect between the role the trauma physician or the emergency physician serves, and thank you for that. Whereas us, I would say, now granted, this goes back to like they're paying for this appointment, but sometimes one of the most important things we can do in that first session is to listen. And I always, in physio school, I don't know about optometry school or chiro school, where it's like, you have to cut them off so you can get to like the need. And I was like, what if I'm the first person who's ever actually just listened to them and validated who they are and this journey they're going through? So whereas the Emerge department, like, you don't have time for this whole thing, and nor is that your job, I feel like that is our job.
And I think patients usually appreciate that as well, right? And it's like, a lot of the times I get the notion in the conversation with the patient where in a lot of their previous experiences they felt rushed or not heard or not listened to, and I think it is torn because, like we've talked about, they are paying for this session, and of course I want to get started in my assessment so I can see objectively what's going on, but I think it goes so much further if you can take that time to listen to them and get the full picture, and then you're just optimizing your care and the patient's trust with you as well. And especially for someone like this where there's just so many moving pieces to this that if I tried to take this history in 5-10 minutes, well, I'm missing 80% of the picture.
I have a slightly different take on it too, because quite frankly, the patient, for me, they're there because they want potentially a prescription that'll help them with their dizziness or their balance or whatever. And if they just empty for the 40 minutes or an hour, I'm actually not going to be able to give them what they wanted that day. And so one of the questions I actually like to ask all my patients in the beginning is and I give them a pretty extensive kind of form beforehand, but is two things. One, what would you like out of today's appointment? What would make today good for you? And, because usually they want me to try to solve a problem for them. And I will say to them, as we go through your history, is it okay if I interrupt you sometimes so that I can dig deeper or ask certain questions? Because there's things, like I think about that in my world. There's a bunch of stuff in here that's relevant to me, and then a whole bunch of stuff that's completely irrelevant up to me, apart from, yes, relevant in some certain ways, but I wouldn't want to take up the whole history time with that either. So it's the balance of listening, and I think maybe as long as the person understands that when you do have to cut things a little shorter or dial in on stuff, you're doing it out of care for the person. You're not doing it out of rushing it, but you're doing it because you want to serve them in that day and time. And same with the emerge. You're like, if you have an emergent problem, I have like 7 to 40 minutes to work with you, depending. If I spend it all listening to your stuff, I actually can't suture you or whatever needs to go on.
Yeah. No, it's just, and I think you highlighted a really good point of like the role you play in that person's care. And I think sometimes we end up playing a role of quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And often the person doesn't know what information is totally relevant and what isn't, and they feel panicked because they want to make sure that they just get it all out. But maybe it's just sort of like the engineering side of me where it's like, I'm like, okay, I have key questions that I know that are differentiators in their history. And a lot of it's like, okay, no, I need to send you over to this person too.
And you're very much honing in on like an aspect
it's a
right.
generalist versus
Yeah,
a specialist,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
My area is easy that way. It's like this person sits down, I'm like, I want to go through all the specific areas of your visual function to make sure it's supporting you within the context of your greater rehab, and then see where I might need to add to that or where I might need to refer. Like that right ear plugging and fullness thing, I'd be like, go see one of my chiro friends who deals with eustachian tube stuff, because that's been a game changer for so many of my patients.
Yeah, I know when she talks about like the broken speaker, the crackliness,
I have that on my intake form because I know that if that's going on, that messes with, outcomes.
So I'm gonna say, Michelle, when you're listening to this, that's a flag for Cam, that one's a flag for us. The crackly speaker, the fullness in the ear, huge flags for it's a eustachian tube draining is what we refer you to, and it's a chiropractor. You have to search it out. What is does the technique have a name?
I think it's just eustachian tube drainage. I don't think there's an actual name.
Don't think
So did you know this existed, by the way?
I did not know.
It's like a very choky, in the
It
back.
is.
I've had it done on myself too.
Yeah, it's not comfortable, but it can work quite well.
So it's like that crackliness that I had a client who on posturography, I could hear it. I referred her down to Victoria because Seth couldn't get her in, and she got it done. It's a chiropractor. It's a uncomfortable process, but if that's an issue, it works like a hot damn. Yeah. That was in that history. Huge, those same things, flags for us too, for that referral. Rach, what else are you, and then I'm gonna ask Cam, what else are you seeing in this list that is be like, you know what, this has been said, I know I'm gonna wanna dig more into this?
I think that vestibular aspect of things as well, where I think you kind of mentioned it when you were going through the history as well, but what exactly is causing these episodes of vertigo and causing her to hit her head, and just that lack of awareness, right? Is there an underlying BPPV that maybe only one canal has been checked? Who knows? Has that been properly assessed? And then is there an otolith component, et cetera? So diving into that vestibular aspect of things, I think would be important. And then just how everything's talking, all the systems are talking to each other, right? Because as we know, if something's been going on for this long, there's clearly been compensation patterns that have built up over the years, and just kind of trying to dig that apart so we can work on a system and a body that is working more efficiently.
Okay. Cam, in this list of her current challenges, what is jumping out at you that pick a couple that you would want to, why is it flagging you, and what would you want to do to, what path would you be traveling down?
Yeah, I mean, the driving is probably the one that has one of the biggest impacts on her life. So yes, there's stuff around work, concentration, focus, and other things, but the loss of independence when you can't drive and you have to rely on other people, and I don't know about you guys, but how much you hate asking other people for help for that stuff too. So I look at that as a massive one. But when we go through her history, and it looks like she's been maybe recommended for prism glasses and or vision therapy potentially, but then I also see she's doing some eye exercise stuff with some of her other people. And immediately I look at it, and the approach that I take with every single patient and the optometrists who work with me is, again, you look at their visual system, you see where it's working, you see where it's not, and then you see where you can support it. And where you can support it also in the context of the other providers. In so many of these cases, and we've seen it working together, there's a way you can adjust someone's prescription, whether it's their contacts, their glasses, or whatever, that make a lot of the visual stuff that's being done as part of the PT and other things way easier and way less symptomatic. So, that jumps out to me immediately. The other one with driving, if your vision's not processing depth and space properly, it will trigger anxiety, like fight or flight response comes up, sympathetic side of things. But driving is also such a high visual thing, everything from the depth perception to refocusing to all of those parts. And so to me, it sort of looks like, and again, that engineering, very linear part of me is I'm like, all right, so someone's still suffering. That's like having a math equation that's not adding up. Okay, and then we go into what are the different parts of the math equation, and I think there's a huge part of her visual piece that's maybe not being addressed here, and probably holding back some of her other care. Especially when she says she can't tolerate the eye exercises. So I'm like, okay, if you can't tolerate them, either the inappropriate thing is being done with you, or you're not being supported in the right way, or your current contact setup or glasses setup or lack thereof is actually holding you back.
Do you know anyone great near Austin, Texas?
Might be able to help find people.
Okay, we'll do a little looky. And I'm gonna say, is there anything for you when you look at this just through like the physician lens that you're like, nothing like putting Rob on the spot here?
No, I don't think I have anything to add. Like I said, patients like this come in and it's pretty evident that they're at breaking point, and I'm not gonna be the one that fixes them, so.
I think the big thing for me that stands out in this too is when we're looking at that full person, we also need to make sure they have the capacity for the rehab, right? There's a lot of mention in here about stress, about my nervous system being on fire, about dysregulation. And so I do think if someone hasn't, there needs to be almost like, let's actually take a big fucking step back and let's make sure that the low-hanging fruit that we know can help create regulation in our nervous system, like routine, like what is our resourcing toolbox for our nervous system? When I always talk about nervous system dysregulation, there's management and there's treatment, and we need to be able to looking at both. So I think in terms of like the specifics you two talked about, but then also let's take a bigger step back and let's look at how is our lifestyle supporting healing? What are those pieces of nervous system, like what's our nervous system regulation toolkit look like? What are we doing for practices to help bring calm, to decrease the panic and that piece of our nervous system as well? So, awesome.
You have a psychologist that works in your clinic, don't you?
We have a clinical counselor. Right. Yeah, no, not a psychologist, but clinical counselor who does like EMDR and somatics and that piece of things as well, because it's such a prevalent piece that's necessary for so often. Yeah. All right, friends, thanks for being here again. Those watching, we will see you next week.